Oh, I'm so sorry for the mess up. When I restarted the computer, everything got messed up. Sorry guys, I'm back. I'm here. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, guys? Awesome. Yes. So sorry for the delay. I have an amazing session today for you. And it is the first day of our Indian literature course, and it is on Indian feminism. I thought I will start with a topic that we don't know much about. Can you see me, guys? Is there any problem? Everything is fine now? Good. Thank God. Thank God. I was so tense. 15 minutes. I'm so sorry. So today we are going to talk about Indian feminism. Ready, guys? I am going to yes, I am going to talk about the history of Indian feminism from the beginning. We have from the 18th, 19th century onwards, amazing Indian women, very powerful Indian women who spearheaded the changes in patriarchal society, who led us towards a better future. Feminism is against social, political, economic inequality, as you know. It is against the subordination and subjugation of women, and it is about equal rights. But Western feminism is not appropriate in the Indian context. Western feminism is Western. We have conditions that are different in India. So in India, Indian women's feminism grew. There was Indian women's movement, and in the 18th and 19th centuries, the Indian women's movement was connected with the nationalist movement. At that time, there was the nationalist movement going on against the British powers in the pre-independence period. So from that time itself, Indian women's movement developed and grew, and then it reached the independence period. Then it came to the post-independence period, globalization, neo-imperialism. All these things are important in the context of Indian feminism. Did you understand, guys? Always, all along, women have been fighting for equal opportunities and equal rights. Now, there are mainly three phases in Indian feminism. The first phase is 1850 to 1915. Can you see the screen, guys? Is it too small for you? I will just increase the size a little bit if you want. The first phase is 1850 to 1915. And the second phase is 1915 to 1947. So, before independence itself, there were two major phases. There were two phases before independence. And then we have 1947 to the present, which is further subdivided, okay? Which is further divided into different categories. Shall we talk about the history of Indian feminism? I will increase the size for you so that you can read properly. Now, Indian feminism, the first phase. As I told you already, this went hand in hand with the social reform movements of Indian Renaissance. Indian Renaissance happened at this time in the 19th century, and first phase of Indian feminism was hand in hand with the Renaissance period. At this time, there were many social reformers among the men as well as the women. I will talk to you about them in detail. And so many Western ideas began to influence them. Western ideas of liberty, equality, fraternity. From French Revolution, there was the period of the national elites. The upper caste people in India began to lead reform movements in India based on Western ideas. As you know, the father of Indian Renaissance, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, is the most important figure in this regard, isn't it? And there were many social reform movements against poverty, against oppression, against injustices based on caste, based on child oppression and child marriages, things like that. So many movements came at this time, mainly as part of the anti-colonial struggle. They wanted to resist the colonial hegemony of the British on India. As you know, Mahatma Gandhi emerged as the leader. These reformers wanted to counter cultural subjugation. You know, the men wanted to counter the cultural subjugation of Indians by the British. Also, the women as well as some men wanted to liberate women from double marginalization. The British were marginalizing them. The Indian men were also marginalizing them. So there was double marginalization. They wanted to create a new India. Look at this. They wanted to create a new society. A new India was being created at this time. These reformers wanted to create a new India. And they opposed many social evils such as polygamy, casteism, sati. Raja Ram Mohan Roy emerged as the leader against sati. Isn't it? Polygamy, casteism, sati, child marriage, illiteracy, all these were fought against by these reformers of this time. And these reformers led to a wholesale renewal of the Indian society. There was a complete change in Indian society during this time. But women still succumbed to patriarchy. That is an interesting thing. Women still were subjugated by patriarchy. Women leaders were seen merely as assisting the struggle of men. The women leaders at this time did not question patriarchal values, and they did not revise, or they did not want a new change in gender relations. So the aim was only to avoid oppression, to put an end to oppression. Did you understand, guys? So that is the tendency of the pre-independence period. As we all know, there were many important figures like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, who stood against sati and polygamy. He also argued for property rights for women. Keshav Chandra Sen led to the passing of Native Marriage Act. That was in 1872. Native Marriage Act. Widow remarriage he promoted. Polygamy he resisted. And Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar was an educational reformer. Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar wanted to support literacy of women also. Jyotirao Phule and his wife Savitri Bai Phule both supported women's education. They established schools. I will talk about them in detail. I am just introducing them first. Then B.R. Ambedkar. B.R. Ambedkar led to many changes, not only for the Dalits but also for women. Hindu Marriage Act, Hindu Succession Act, Adoption and Maintenance Act, like that many very revolutionary acts were passed under the leadership of B.R. Ambedkar. Pandita Ramabai, Tarabai Shinde, all very important figures of this time. Shall we talk about them one by one now? First, Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Raja Ram Mohan Roy was a social leader and reformer, and he was one of the founders of Brahmo Samaj. All of us might have heard of Brahmo Samaj. It was a reform movement rooted in Hinduism. And he wanted to reform Hinduism. He wanted to change Hinduism. It was the Mughal emperor who gave him the title Raja, it seems. The title Raja came from the Mughal emperor. And he led to lots of religious reforms. He had a very liberal view of religion. And as you know, he also supported English education. He was an Anglicist. He wanted tolerance for religions, and he was an Anglicist. There are some books tracts that he wrote about sati, etc., that are very famous. Sati tracts. And very importantly, he established Hindu College, which is now Hindu Presidency College and Presidency University. That is a very important step that he was leader of. He took the leadership to establish this amazing college and university, as many of you would know. So his writings also are important. Sometimes they will ask about his writings also, okay? But I'm not talking about him in more detail here because this is a lecture on Indian feminism. So I'm just talking about all the major reformers of Indian Renaissance. They are all leaders of Indian Renaissance. There were many more. Not only these people, there were many more. I just want to talk about the main names who are relevant to women. Okay? And Keshav Chandra Sen was also a social reformer, and he was a philosopher. He wanted to reform religion also and society. His own version of Brahmo Samaj he started. He broke away from Raja Ram Mohan Roy's Brahmo Samaj, and he started his own Brahmo Samaj, where he experimented with Hinduism as well as Christianity. And Christianity was a very major power, during this time. There were many evangelical missionaries also who led social reform in India. You can't deny that. And both, especially Keshav Chandra Sen, was influenced by Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who was Swami Vivekananda's guru as well. And Keshav Chandra Sen also led to the upliftment of women in different ways. Then Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar is an educationist. He was a very learned man. He was a scholar and he was a very major educationist who was also a social reformer. He wrote in Bengali. He has contributed to the development of modern Bengali language. And he was a very major figure in Bengali literature. He did not write novels and poetry. He wrote prose mostly. And many of his works were about women. For example, he has written books supporting widow remarriage and things like that. And he led a very crucial role in leading Lord Dalhousie to pass the Hindu Widow Remarriage Act. The Hindu Widow Remarriage Act of 1856. So this presentation that I am showing you is a very good guide for you to do your own reading. Vidyasagar is a title given to him because he was a great scholar. Vidyasagar, ocean of knowledge. At that time, a very major influence on all these reformers was Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. And Vivekananda, Keshav Chandra Sen, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, all of them were influenced by Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Rabindranath Tagore also was inspired by these figures. He was called one of the pioneers of Bengali Renaissance. Leave Bengal now, we come to Maharashtra. The two central places or central forces of Indian Renaissance was Bengal and Maharashtra. In Maharashtra, Jyotirao Phule or Jyotiba Phule is a very, very important name, not only in Maharashtra, in entire India. He was a very major anti-caste activist. He and his wife were very important figures in fighting against caste and in the emergence of Dalit movement in Maharashtra. Both of them were pioneers of women's education also. It was Jyotirao Phule and Savitribai Phule who started the first school for girls in Pune. I think in one exam they have already asked about it. And Satya Shodhak Samaj he founded. Truth Seekers Society. Satya Shodhak Samaj Jyotirao Phule started. And Mahatma Jyotirao Phule, he came to be called. Like Mahatma Gandhi, he also was given the title Mahatma Jyotirao Phule. There was a lot of influence of Christianity on him also. He read a lot of books from the West. Jyotirao Phule was a very major scholar. He read a lot of books from the West. It is said that he read Thomas Paine and such writers, and he influenced Indian social reformers with his original ideas. However, some of his, like even for Mahatma Gandhi, some of his ideas and developments have also been contested on. People have talked about it from various angles. They were against untouchability, the caste oppression of untouchability, and also the oppression on widows. Young widows shaving their heads and dressing in white, etc., they were completely against. So in various fronts, they stood for. Jyotirao Phule and Savitribai Phule stood for widow remarriage and women's liberation. The Aryans, the Aryan theory of India was a reflection of the Aryan theory in the West. There was some debate regarding the Aryans and the Muslim presence in India, etc., in the context of Hinduism here also. The contemporary debates on Hinduism and the contemporary debates on religious coexistence in India all go back to Jyotirao Phule and his time also. Jyotirao Phule was a very major writer. There are many published works that he has written. It is not just one, but many published works he has written. He has written about, I think he has written about Tukaram and such writers. He has obviously written about Shivaji, and he has written, I don't know, Marathi, so I don't know how to pronounce all those titles, but he has written very major works. His wife, Savitribai Phule, was his companion. Like I said, women were considered helpers or companions to men in social reform. Her name is therefore always remembered in the context of Jyotirao Phule along with her husband. She was a very major educationalist as well as social reformer, and she was also a writer. She has also written poetry and books, some books, etc. She was a very major figure in Satya Shodhak Samaj, the Truth Seekers Society. And she has written poetry which are very liberatory poetry, resistance poetry she has written. She was against infanticide and child marriage and oppression of widows. And not only books, but also some letters that she has written have come down to us. Kranti Jyoti she is called because she was a revolutionary. So her works are important. Her social activism is important. She did a lot of, she started organizations including schools, and she was one of the first of the Indian feminists. Oh, today was G set. Oh, okay. Yeah, in Maharashtra, Women's Day is celebrated on her day, on her birthday, Savitribai Phule's birthday. And both of them obviously were against the performance of Sati also. Sati was completely abolished because of the work of so many people, including the Phules. Then B.R. Ambedkar. Ambedkar did a lot of work for women. As I told you, Ambedkar's contribution is undeniable in the passing of many acts in India that are relevant for women's liberation. As I already told you, the Hindu Marriage Act was there. Hindu Marriage Act was in 1955. Then Hindu Succession Act was there next year itself, 1956. It gave women legal right to property, family property. Then there was Children's Adoption and Maintenance Act. Women had the right to adopt a child, that was there. Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act, that was also there. All these are important acts that came under the leadership of B.R. Ambedkar. One day in this 5-day course, I'll be talking about Dalit literature and Dalit studies also. So right now, I'm not going into B.R. Ambedkar more. He was, as you know, a very major writer, and he has also started periodicals and such things. And he was very major figure in Dalit movement in India. Pandita Ramabai is a very important name today. People across India are exploring Indian feminism. Indian feminism is becoming more and more represented in literary works, in literary studies, in exams. Remember Urvashi Bhutalia they had asked about. Pandita Ramabai was a scholar. That is why she was called Pandita by University of Calcutta. She was a very major scholar of that time and social reformer. And her most important work is The High Caste Hindu Woman. The High Caste Hindu Woman is a book that she has written. She, after she became a widow, after the death of her husband, she was influenced by Brahma Samaj and such reform movements. And there are some very important things that she did. She went and gave evidence before Hunter Commission. Did you know that? Pandita Ramabai gave evidence before Hunter Commission. She gave a fiery speech before Hunter Commission. That's a very important thing that she did. And then she has also traveled abroad at this time. She wrote many books for children actually. Stree Dharma Niti, The High Caste Hindu Woman, very important. And you know what she did? She went and stayed abroad with her cousin. You know who her cousin was? The first woman to become a doctor in India. That was Pandita Ramabai's cousin. And when she lived abroad, she Anandibai Joshi, that is the first female doctor, Anandibai Joshi, her cousin. And she converted to Christianity. Pandita Ramabai converted to Christianity. And this was a very, very momentous thing, of course, for a widow to travel abroad and convert to Christianity. These are not simple things. And she wrote many books in her language, but at the same time in English, she wrote The High Caste Hindu Woman. She fought against the oppression of the British also. And then she was influenced by Christianity a lot. She also, I think, translated the Bible into her language, Marathi. So there are so many things that she has done. Today, a lot of research is being done on Pandita Ramabai. And in gender studies, etc., she has become a very, very important name. Pandita Ramabai. And then, next important figure we have is Tarabai Shinde. Wow, they're all Marathi women. And many of them are upper caste, but they are all dedicated to caste upliftment. They were against caste discrimination. Tarabai Shinde's famous book, everybody should know, is Stree Purush Tulana. Stree Purush Tulana means comparison between man and woman. That was a very major book that Tarabai Shinde wrote. And all of them were high caste actually. But they questioned Christianity. They questioned Hinduism and its oppression of the castes. So this is a feminist and a very important figure. Tarabai Shinde was associated with the Bhules. Savitribai Phule and Jyotirao Phule were associated with Tarabai Shinde. All of them were activists in Satya Shodhak Samaj. Tarabai Shinde in Stree Purush Tulana talks about the role of men and women in India, especially in the upper caste. And this book was written as a reply to an article in a newspaper. She wrote this book as a reply to an article in a newspaper about some criminal case against a widow. There was a criminal case against a widow, and she was accused of killing her illegitimate son. She had a son. She was a widow, but she had a son with some other man, and then she was sentenced to be hanged. So what is a good woman and what is a bad woman? That question is raised by Tarabai Shinde in Stree Purush Tulana. I am reminded of Vijay Tendulkar's silence the court is in session, which is also incidentally from Maharashtra. So, what is morality and how does it oppress women, which is a very contemporary idea. That is what Tarabai Shinde has talked about in Stri Purush Tulana. So these were very major reformers of this time. And Tarabai Shinde started an organization for Hindu widows, child widows called Sharda Sadan in Pune. And there was another organization, Shri Mahipatram Rupram Ashram. I don't know more about it. Bhagini Samaj in Pune. They are all very major organizations that stood for women's rights and women's liberation in India in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Did you enjoy this, guys? Kanyadan also. Correct. Did you enjoy this session, guys? Did you like the video? Now, let me now talk about the second phase in Indian feminism. The second phase is from 1915 to 47. It was characterized by the emergence of many organizations like Women's Indian Association, then the National Council of Women in India, then All India Women's Conference. All were very major organizations and endeavors that were taken up in the second phase from 1917 to 47 period. And at this time, Mahatma Gandhi and other mainstream social reformers legitimized women's participation in the Indian freedom movement. They accepted women activists more, and in the civil disobedience movement and satyagraha, women began to take an active role at this time. In Punjab, 5,000 women protested in a procession at Lahore in 1930. 5,000 women went in a procession in Lahore. And then Durga Bai Deshmukh organized the women in Madras. So they were all very, very important figures. Very, very important figures of this time in the second phase. The third phase is there. The third phase, it is further divided into the period of accommodation, the period of crisis, and from 1975 to present time. Period of accommodation is a time of slowly women being accommodated into mainstream society. Slowly more and more women are finding their place in mainstream society. Period of accommodation. At this time, there is Hindu Marriage Act of 1954 and Hindu Code Bill. Both these fixed the age of marriage for men and women. Child marriage was criminalized. Very, very important. Then I already told you in the context of Ambedkar, Hindu Succession Act, Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act, Dowry Protection Act. These are all very important in the context of Indian feminism, of course. All are acts that protected women. Then there was, after the 1960s, war with Pakistan and China, all that happened. And then there was economic crisis. There were lots of problems at this time, which eventually led to, what is it called? Emergency. So economic crisis was there, rising prices was there. There was a lot of discontent in urban India as well as rural India. And poverty was still very rampant. Green Revolution helped to some extent. Many people were helped by the Green Revolution, by which agriculture was uplifted. But there were many other problems still. The Communist Party in south of India as well as in Bengal had a lot of role to play in the upliftment of women. The Communist Party started many women's groups like the Shramik Mahila Sangatana of all over India. It was there. Working women's organization. Shramik Mahila Sangatana means Sangathan means working women's organization. And so women in various professions became organized. Then the Naxalite movement also in a positive way led to some upliftment of women, a progressive organization for women, etc. Many women emerged as leaders and rebels, and they began to speak out against oppression. So all these things led to a lot of changes in actual women's lives. There was a lot of protest against atrocities like violence, rape, dowry system, unemployment among women, etc. In the 1970s, there is something called New Women's Movement. In the 1970s, we have New Women's Movement. At this time, lots of feminist literature also began to be written. People began to write more and more. Women also began to write more and more about their freedom, about their rights. So there was more visibility to Indian women's issues. Did you understand? At this time, women's studies developed. UGC initiated the establishment of women's study centers across India in many universities, and it was incorporated into humanities and social sciences. Many women's NGOs also played a very important role. NGOs also played a very important role at this time. Slowly, so many organizations that we are aware of came into being, like SEVA, for example, National Commission for Women, then National Council for Women, and so on and so forth. SEVA is a very important association that gave women employment. Ordinary poor women, etc., found lots of employment because of SEVA. And the political upheavals of 1975 as a result of emergency led to many changes, and eventually within a few decades there started globalization as well as digitalization. Everything began to be brought under the cybernetic space, and technology came into being. So because of all this, what happened is women's reality and lifestyle, everything changed. Now after this, I want to talk to you about some important figures in Indian feminism. I have only included 4 or 5 people. There are so many, at least 15-20 people are there who are very, very important, but I have included only some figures. First and foremost, I have put Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak was Indian literary theorist and feminist critic. As all of us know, she was a critic based on Marxism, deconstruction and post-structuralism, feminism, then post-colonialism. In all these realms, we have Gayatri Spivak's writings. In Other Worlds is a very famous book. Can the Subaltern Speak? Outside the Teaching Machine. These are all very important books of Gayatri Spivak pertaining to feminism and post-colonialism. In Other Worlds is a classic work that talks about culture today. Essays in Cultural Politics. That is the subtitle, as you know. Essays in Cultural Politics, it is called. And it is a very classic book that combines post-structuralism, then Marxism and feminism. Then Can the Subaltern Speak? She was part of the Subaltern Studies group, and she is trying to give more voice to the subaltern people, the voiceless, marginal people in India, in the subaltern sectors. That is the meaning of Can the Subaltern Speak? Outside the Teaching Machine, have you heard? It is a very important book that is published in which year? 1993, same year as Culture and Imperialism. It is a very important book as well, outside the teaching world. Again, pertaining to theory and feminism. The next important figure here is Urmila Pavar. As you know, Indian feminism cannot be separated from Dalit feminism. Many Indian feminists are Dalit women. Urmila Pavar is a very major Dalit feminist. And Urmila Pavar, also she is from Maharashtra. She speaks about the triple oppression faced by women due to caste, class and gender. She has written in Marathi language, which has been translated into English also. And Urmila Pavar has written short stories. Aidan or Weave is a very famous work. The Weave of My Life or Aidan. We Also Made History. These are important books by memoirs, I think. Yeah. And she has also written short stories, etc. though. That is Urmila Pavar. An important figure who has talked about triple oppression. Then Kamila Basin. She died recently, as you might have heard. Very, very important figure. And Kamila Basin was a developmental feminist and poet. Developmental feminist means she did a considerable work in human development, in development studies, as it is called. She was based in New Delhi, where she founded Jagori, a women's group. Sangat, feminist network, also is very famous. There is a book that she has written called, that became very famous, a poem actually, Kyunki Main Ladki Hoon, Mujhe Padhna Hai. That is a very famous poem that she has written also. What is patriarchy? That is a very famous work that she has written. What is patriarchy? Then understanding gender and exploring masculinity. These are her important works. There are so many other books also that I have not mentioned. Laughing Matters. Then हंसना तो संघर्षों में भी जरूरी है. Feminism and its relevance in South Asia. Borders and boundaries. Women in India's partition. Understanding gender. So many books are there. Only a few I have just mentioned. She has effectively transcended the borders of class, caste, etc. And very famously, she gave the slogan Azadi for women. Kamila Basin gave the slogan Azadi for women. You must have heard of that. Urvashi Bhutalia. It is because of the question on Urvashi Bhutalia in NET that I thought I will do a PPT and teach you Indian feminism today. Urvashi Bhutalia has written extensively on gender, media, communalism, and she co-founded the publishing house Kali for Women and later Zuban. You should Google search and take down all the other books on your own. It is there in the internet. I just searched and I found in half a minute. Did you understand, Rahila? If I type nothing, you will gain. If you type and you write, you will gain. You want me to pass and have a great career, or you want to have a great career? That is the question. If you want me to have a great career, okay, I will do the work. But if you want a great career, you should do the work also. Kali for Women and Zuban are, yes, there are videos made by her, yes. Kali for Women and Zuban are both publishing houses for women. Then, many important works. In other words, new writing by Indian women. Ritu Menon is also a very important Indian feminist. We should know her. Making a difference, publishing, feminist publishing in the South. The other side of silence, that is what they asked the question about in NET. They asked a question from Urvashi Bhutalia, the other side of silence, hai? Voices from the partition of India. Okay, so she is trying to talk about partition in the other side of silence. Remember, Kamila Basin also wrote about women in partition. Then there is Vandana Shiva. Vandana Shiva is an Indian eco-feminist and environmental activist. Eco-feminism she started. Her writings and activism are about intellectual property rights, biodiversity, biotechnology, bioethics. Some of you can do research in all these areas. Did you understand, guys? And then Vandana Shiva's important works, Staying Alive, Women, Ecology and Development. They might ask from here, okay, in the next exam. Then Ecofeminism, co-authored with Maria Mice, I don't know her. Then Earth, Democracy, Justice, Sustainability and Peace. These are all important works by Vandana Shiva. Vandana Shiva, eco-feminist. Then Ruth Vaneeda. Ruth Vaneeda focuses on Indian history. Co-founded Manushi, a journal about women and society. They might ask all that. Manushi. Okay. Her books include Same-Sex Love in India, Love's Right, Same-Sex Marriages, Gender, Sex and the City. So she has written a lot for LGBTIQ people also. Ruth Vaneeda. Okay. Then Chandra Talpade Mahanti. She is a very famous post-colonial and transnational feminist. Her works focus on transnational feminist theory. Remember, these are all very, very important concepts these days. Transnational feminist theory, anti-capitalist feminist practices, anti-racist education, politics of knowledge. These are all important. Under Western Eyes. Remember, it is a title of a novel by Joseph Conrad. But here, Chandra Talpade Mohanty is writing Under Western Eyes, Feminist Scholarship and Colonial Discourses. Third World Women and the Politics of Feminism, she wrote. Feminism Without Borders, that is very famous. Decolonizing theory, practicing solidarity. Will you read extra about all these books, guys? Make your own notes. All these are very important, okay? Make your own notes. Abhi se, don't think I don't know what to study. Where is this from? Abhi to mil gaya na? You can do your own work. Little bit extra reading. You will be scholars. By the time they ask in the next exam, you will know a lot of things. You should also try to, present some papers in this regard. You should try to write something about it. Teach possibly. Okay? All this will help you remember. Now, some important works. Apart from these Dalit feminists, there are many others. I did not mention everyone. Some important works, dekho. Women writing in India. 600 BC to early 20th century. My God, it's a massive work. It's a massive work by Susi Taru and K. Lalita. Susi Taru and K. Lalita wrote very important book, Women Writing in India, 600 BC to early 20th century. Will you remember, guys? Very famous. Then, Recasting Women, Essays in Colonial History. That also, Kumkum Sangari and Sudesh Vaid. Famous. Then, From Myths to Markets, Essays on Gender. Uma Chakravarti has written. Then, Mobilizing India, Women, Music and Migration between India and Trinidad. It is written by Tejaswini Niranjana. These are all very major books. Please read about them. Read more about each and every one of these names I have mentioned. They are all very important. Okay? So, did you like today's session? Will you share it with your friends who need to know all this? So, thank you very much. We have come to the end of this beautiful session on Indian feminism. I will talk to you tomorrow about something similar in Indian literature. Okay, guys? Okay? Bye-bye. Good night. See you.